Now, this is an issue I want to address. Does it something that's bothered me for a while, and it's from two different groups. The first is the evangelical fundamentalist creationist Christians, theists, and the other is the fundamentalist evangelical proselytizing fundamentalist Christian anti-theists. And I'll show you what I mean. And I mean, it does. This is what historical Christian scholarship, church history, not some African warlord is preaching, or somebody who started up a church 50 years ago or 20 years ago and is teaching this because they read it straight from the Bible. I'm going back to the original languages of Hebrew and Greek and using Christian scholarship and Jewish scholarship that is recognized throughout all the major universities: Harvard, Yale, Cambridge, Oxford, those places. Not, Billy Bob's seminary. So, serpent, does it equal snake? Well, we have to get in some background. Here's the first creation narrative, right? First creation story of Genesis. This is the one that calls God El, or Elohim. Man and woman are made at the same time, same day. Everything's created ex nihilo. God is not anthropomorphic, and it's God. So this one has to be Abrahamic or pre-Abrahamic. The second one has to be after Moses. Why? Because it doesn't use God at all. It uses the name of the deity, the Lord, or Yahweh. And do we see snake or serpent? Let's see. Whoop, right there. You can't. Can you focus it? It is focusing in on it. Right there. Serpent. Sorry if you can't read that one. Go to the King James. What does the King James say? Trying to focus. It says serpent. If you couldn't see, go to another one. Sorry about this. Right there, serpent. Serpent, serpent, serpent. What does serpent mean? This word is nakash, right? Serpent. And the definitions of it are given, and from a very reliable source. Serpent can be synonymous with snake, because some translations translate snake. That's why this source here has it also as snake, because of the more modern ones, or less accurate, I should say. Many modern ones still keep it as serpent. What does it mean? Serpent, or image of serpent, or fleeing serpent, mythological. Now, image of serpent, I'd like to get more depth on that, but let's skip over that for right now, because that's also very important. Now, how was it translated when it was translated into Greek? How did the early Christians read it and understand it, and how did the early church understand it? This word, drakon, which gets translated as dragon or serpent, or sometimes another name for Satan, because it was always understood the dragon was in the garden. Now again, this is the later anthropomorphic view of God, and the earliest Christian commentaries on this creation narrative says it's not literal. Clement of Alexandria talks about this. He actually says this one isn't literal either. But the early Christians and the early rabbis would say, look, we know God is telling us to look at this text mystically, right? Because the Torah was always mystical, but especially the first 10 things. Why? Because the writer intentionally does things like puts things out of order. The most obvious is, where does Cain's wife come from? But there's all sorts of other things like, and it wasn't until the High Middle Ages that these things try to get reconciled with Lilith and all that kind of stuff. Man and woman are created twice, different orders. And this one definitely was heavily just anthropomorphized, because God, he doesn't know he walks around. 2 flood stories, you can see this as well. So serpent, what was a serpent? Whenever you said serpent, it was dragon. Look at all the depictions in the Middle Ages. Dragon. Now there's this word, Tenyan, which is another type of dragon, but that's more like crocodile. People say dinosaur, that's creationist idiots. But the image of the serpent, that's very important, because that again is a monstrous thing, right? Now, some people say, "Oh, that's the Nahashtun, that's the golden serpent that was held up." Even today, people know that serpent and snake don't just equate, just like dragons and dinosaurs don't equate, right? Like, if you talk about dragons, you're talking about one thing. If you're talking about dinosaurs, you're talking about something else. 500 years ago, they find Tyrannosaurus rex skeleton, or Stegosaurus skeletons, or mammoth bones, or whatever. And there you go. Or it's like saying, oh, look at, if you take this King James super literally, well, Tyrannosaurus rex means tyrant lizard king. Well, that means it wasn't a dinosaur, because, dinosaurs didn't exist because dinosaurs weren't lizards. They were a different species. Well, yeah. So how this was always understood, the thing talks and says you will always crawl on your belly and eat dust. Now, if this were just meant snake, don't you think people knew that snakes were venomous and ate animals? This is the word, Tanyan, which means venomous serpent. And I'll pull it up even right here. Forgive me, this is kind of going slow. Blah, 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 blah. 10,000 pardons, my friends. Ugh. But yeah, here we go. Tools. Let's see what this is. Not Nakash, but Tenyan. Now, a talking snake. Well, dragons breathe fire. Some can fly. They hoard gold, and they talk. Because even in English, you can see God's never mentioned in here. It's Lord, and he walks. And he even says that he's of flesh and bone. Here, El, or Elohim, or Eloi, says that there's only one of him, and he's plural. but he's not of flesh, he's spirit, and he stands apart from his creation. But it's the same God. One's understood anthropomorphized. It's kind of like a child's version of the Bible, but not really. It's another way of understanding it. This is common in Judaism. It's transferred over to church. You say something one way, then you say it another way, then you say it a third way. Carried on in the liturgy of the church. Old Testament, New Testament, Old Testament, Gospel, Epistles. And they all line up. That was solid in the West. In the East, it was differently. But even in the East, you say things 3 times. The thrice holy name. The ages of ages of ages, amen. Everything's 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. And that's throughout all Scripture. I shouldn't say all, because there's apocryphal and inter stuff, and then there's just things that were not meant to be Scripture, obviously. But look at any of the ancient encyclicals, like 1st, 2nd Peter, 1st John, 2nd John, any of this stuff, and look at the different authorships and the different writing styles. And it depends on what dates these things are coming from. Creationism is stupid, and to suggest that creationism was believed in before about 200 years ago is ridiculous. The ancient church used the Platonic view of the earth and of creation. And guess what? So did the rabbis. The world was already thoroughly Hellenized. Day meant epoch. Even early Christians were chastising Jewish communities for taking this too literally. And these were people in good standing with the church, whose works were canonized, who were considered church doctors. Remember that big, bad, scary thing of if you went against the church in medieval times, you'd get burned at the stake? Well, you might get burned at the stake for espousing creationism, although you wouldn't, because that kind of stuff was very rare. But you absolutely would get no punishment for saying, no, it took, the earth is... Nobody actually ever tried counting up how old the earth was in the Christian West until a few hundred years ago. And they never did it in the East. The Jews had it somewhere at like 5,000. But then again, well, this is getting into the age of the earth. It says, when it says the sons and the sons these and they begat, and they're talking about whole tribes and generations of people. So you don't have a timeline. And in that day, even the expression in English doesn't mean a day. Peace to you.